Okay, I'd like to welcome all you 8th graders. I'm glad you all can be here together. This is Mr. Hallock, who taught here from 1979 to 2005. And this is something he's been doing for years and years and years. He'll tell you more, obviously, what he's doing, but Civil War. And he's going to be able to show you all these great things and discuss how the Civil War got rolling and all about it. So thank you, Mr. Hallock, for being here.
Hey, very well. Thank you very much. And I think I'm supposed to maybe thank the math teachers for donating some...
Well, actually, Spanish.
Oh, Spanish. Oh, okay. Because to try to do everything that I could possibly do, we'd be here the rest of the day. If I brought in everything that I have at home, I'd need a truck. So I have to learn to keep things in perspective.
So that's your time.
At least we have a clock in here. We used to do this since I retired, in the old Commons, which is now, I guess, the reception area. And there was no clock there. And teachers in general, history teachers, I think in particular, once we get wound up, it's hard to wind down, especially when you're talking about something that I've been interested in at least since I was in high school. A lot of my kids used to say, Mr. Hallock, how did you get so interested in history? Because I think I was about as excited about it when I left as when I started. Nothing ever dulled it. I've been into history since I learned to read, I think. Because the first books I picked up were encyclopedias, books about kings and wars and presidents and you name it. And it's just, that's what I do. Or what I did and what I do here. And it kind of rubs off. I was telling your headmistress, my wife and I had one son who went to our local schools in Robbinsville, where we lived for almost 40 years now. Went to Lawrence High School, because Robbinsville, we didn't have a high school yet, we do now. And then the University of Virginia. And he stayed in Virginia after he graduated, and guess what he teaches? This big thing. Advanced placement, United States history. And he is a bigger Civil War freak than I am. So, little family background. My wife taught here 4 years. She was the upper school math teacher back in the late 70s before our son was born. So she has some history with the school as well. And that's how I got to meet Mr. Jinjo before I even worked here. But anyway, that's enough background. All right. Most times when you're studying history in general and you're going with a textbook and maybe some other readings, and you take the Civil War, you know about Abraham Lincoln, and you know about Jefferson Davis, and you know about U.S. Grant, you know about Robert E. Lee, etc., etc. I began to think years ago, when I was still teaching here, fine, and that's wonderful. You know, Gettysburg, very important. I like to talk a lot about the Battle of Antietam, which occurred in September of 1862. One-day battle. Still the bloodiest single day in American military history. A lot of kids, I'd say, what is the bloodiest day in American military history? And somebody raising D-Day, not even close. Over 20,000 American soldiers were killed, wounded, or missing. And a lot of the missing ended up among the killed or captured. Over 20,000, 23,000, I think, in one day from about 6 o'clock in the morning till 5 or 6 o'clock at night. That was it. All right. Trick question though, if you ever get on Jeopardy and they throw that at you, there's a trick to that. How come so many Americans were killed that day? Anybody figured it out? Both sides were what? Americans. Yeah. About 10,000 or so Southerners were casualties that day and about 13,000 Northerners in one day. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that later if we get into this. But I decided I want to know more about the ordinary guy, the farmer, the blacksmith, the teacher, the schoolboy, okay, whoever they were, that decided they had to go, because in the beginning everybody on both sides were volunteers. A draft was held. This is something you may cover as you go along the Civil War. The first draft in the United States was started in the South in 1862. because as you may know, the South had only a fraction of the population the North did. Okay, so they had to call people in involuntarily sooner. But the North started a draft in the middle of 1863, took effect around the time of Battle of Gettysburg. All right, but I just, what motivated these people? They were very naive. We hadn't had a land war of any size other than fighting Indians out on the frontier since the War of 1812. And that was a small war. The armies were always very small compared to Civil War armies. First major battle on land in the Civil War was fought near a town called Manassas, Virginia. It was a railroad junction, and the North wanted to capture it from the South because railroads were becoming very, very important for moving men and supplies and so on. That first battle, both sides, armies, had between 30 and 35,000 men. Now, if you put all the battles in the War of 1812 together, I don't know if they ever had more than 3,000, 5,000 men on a side. Okay, so the Civil War was going to be something that nobody really had much experience with. A few professional soldiers maybe fought in battle wars in Europe, whatever. So, but what motivated people to go out and risk their lives? Now, talk about causes of the war, and everybody will talk about slavery or the expansion of slavery to be a little more correct. The tariff was an argument, states' rights versus the power of the federal government, and so on. But a lot of it came down to more personal stuff than that. Some people had strong political feelings, but a lot of people, when the South seceded, a lot of Northerners said, they just can't do that. We got a good thing going here. How can they break it up? You can't do that. Southerners, many of them were motivated by the fact that in order for the North to win this war, what do you think they had to do? What was the one really big thing the North had to do to win this war? What were they fighting about? The South wanted to leave, yeah.
They were fighting mostly about slavery.
Well, yeah, but the South wanted to leave. Okay.
Wanted to maintain the Union.
Maintain the Union. Keep this. So how do you win a war where you're fighting to keep the Union together?
Well, a lot of the battles happened in the South, so the South had the major stronghold there, while the North had to transport all its goods and weapons.
You're warm, but we're not quite there yet.
Had to capture the South.
That's it. The North has to invade and take over the South and make them come back into the Union, if it comes to that, and it will. You'll get to a period called Reconstruction when the war is over. A whole bunch of hoops the South was supposed to jump through before they could get back into the Union. All right, so Southerners, many of them, most of them felt we're being invaded. We have to defend our home, our land, our families. If I'm sure you've all covered the Revolutionary War early in the year. That's one of the big things that motivated us in the Revolution. That and help from the French helped us win the Revolutionary War. If you were wargaming on a computer, Revolutionary War, the British would have to win every time. Okay, unless you took into consideration what motivation came from defending your home and your family. That motivated a lot of Southerners. So we had a lot of reasons people went off to fight. But they didn't really realize what they were getting into. A lot of them, well, have you done Fort Sumter yet? I think Mr. Foley mentioned that you've gone over that.
Yeah.
After Fort Sumter, where the Confederates fired on the Union fort in Charleston, South Carolina, President Lincoln asked for, what was it, I think 75,000 volunteers. For how long? 90 days. Figured the war would be over in 3 months. How long did it take? 4 years. Almost exactly 4 years. And over 600,000 dead. The whole war, the whole Civil War, more American casualties, killed, wounded, whatever, than any of our other wars. As a matter of fact, there were more men killed, wounded, or captured at that one battle of Antietam than there were in the entire Revolutionary War, which lasted 8 years. 1 day. All right, so I decided, well, what about the ordinary soldier? Let's take a look at how they lived during their time. So one thing you've got to do, you've got to get people in the Army, volunteers, later draftees, all right? At the first Battle of Manassas, there was a lot of confusion. You had Northerners wearing gray uniforms, some of them. You had Southerners, some of them, wearing blue uniforms. Easy to tell friend from foe. Well, you can say, well, you look at the flag, except when the wind wasn't blowing so that the flags were out nice and straight, the Confederate original national flag could be easily mistaken for the U.S. flag. And the other thing that could lead to a lot of confusion on a battlefield was the smoke. The black powder that they used in their rifles, muskets, cannons, produces an incredible amount of thick smoke. Any of you ever been to a Civil War, a Revolutionary War, whatever, reenactment? Mrs. McCarthy, I was there with you one time.
I saw you.
Yeah, when we did. Okay, a lot of smoke, right? Yeah. Makes it even harder to know who's your friend and who's your enemy. So what do you want to do? You want to get your people dressed up in uniforms, even if they're not exactly the same, but they're close enough that you can more easily tell your friend from your enemy. And so you settle on, well, okay, the blue and the gray. It wasn't quite as simple as that, but that's more or less what we settled on. All right, so we're going to have uniforms. All right, so they take me into the Army. But first I have to pass a physical. A lot of the doctors, quote unquote, weren't what we would call doctors today. They certainly didn't have graduate degrees and 8 years of college and et cetera, et cetera. Some did, but a lot didn't. Some of the physicals were meaningful, and they found that there were people who didn't qualify physically to serve in the Army. But as I was told a number of years ago at a national park, at a program I saw there, sometimes the physical was as simple as this. Get up, please. You're not troubled. Stand on your right foot. Stand on your left foot. Let me see your teeth. Good, sit down, you're in. Okay, that's it. For some of them, that's all. Why do you think they had to know their right foot from their left foot?
So they can tell who's your friend and who's your foe?
No?
Was it to March?
Yeah. Left, right. Some guys who hadn't been exposed to whatever to know left were from farms. They knew something most of us, maybe all of us in this room now, don't know the difference between hay and straw. But farm boys knew it, and if they had trouble with left and right, the drill sergeants would tie a piece of hay on their left shoe, to their left shoe, and a piece of straw to their right shoe. And when they marched, they didn't go left, right, they went hay foot, straw foot, hay foot, straw foot, until they figured out how you were supposed to be marching. Maybe eventually they caught on with the difference of left and right. So there were a lot of things that you had to come across, that had to deal with once you came in. So then you started, and I see my lovely Brogan, excuse me, became untied. Happens every once in a while. These shoes we're going to talk about in a second. They're called Jefferson Brogans. Not sure where the Jefferson came from, since Thomas Jefferson had been long dead. Because these came out the U.S. Army. We walk around real quick and take a look at them. In the 1850s, they were made of oak tanned leather. They were very sturdy. Why do you think we needed such sturdy shoes? Yeah,
For like marching or walking the
yeah,
terrain?
these guys are gonna, at some point or other, everybody march 15, 20, 25, sometimes even 30 miles a day in the infantry. How did the infantry move? On foot, their own 2 feet. Not like the cavalry who could ride, or even some of the artillery, the cannoneers, some of whom could ride. Infantrymen had to walk, to march. Okay? They needed strong, comfortable shoes. You couldn't have your whole unit, at the end of the day, you march 20 miles, and they've all got blisters all over their feet. These things don't look particularly comfortable, but they are. And one other thing that's important about them, not too many years before the Civil War, shoemakers began to make shoes in rights and lefts. If I were doing a Revolutionary War demonstration for you now, I would have a pair of buckle shoes on like they were, and both of them looked the same. They were made on what they call a straight last, and the one you wore on your right foot became your right shoe, and the one you wore on your left foot conformed to they conformed to your feet, became your left shoe. These kind, made for rights and lefts, you can imagine, are quite a bit more comfortable. So, all right, so we're in the Army, we've got sturdy shoes, and we need other clothing. Underneath these trousers, I have a pair of cotton drawers, all right? Drawers not like, boxers or briefs, that kind of stuff was a joke about today. Went from your waist to your ankles. They're wool in the winter, cotton in the summer, and I can't show it to you. Now you haven't had lunch yet, so then you have trousers. Now my trousers are wool. These are what they call sky blue. Confederates, I didn't bring any Confederate trousers, it could be gray, or depending on the dye that they use, something of a light to medium shade of brown, which is as close as they could come to gray sometimes. All right, but they're wool. Now, at least Federal troops, U.S. troops, trousers are wool. Did they have lighter weight trousers for summertime? Because remember, most of these battles, somebody said, most of the battles are being fought down south. It's hot down there. Now, it doesn't even have to be summer to be hot, but it is hot down there. Most of the battles were fought between like April and October. Okay, wasn't very much fighting went on in the wintertime. Did they have lighter weight, more comfort? No, they did not. This is it. This is what you wore year-round. Confederates, sometimes the stuff would be made of what they called jean cloth, which was a combination of wool and another fabric, another material that the South had plenty of. What was it? Cotton. Cotton and wool mixture. That's the jean cloth, a little bit lighter, not quite as heavy as wool, but not all that. It's not like, forget shorts. That was scandalous. Nobody ever wore anything like that, did. Okay? So you have Yankees wearing the sky blue trousers, Confederates wearing some shade of gray or something close to it, similar material. Then you have up here, under this I have a regular kind of undershirt, except it does have long sleeves. It's not like a t-shirt undershirt like we wear today. Then over the top, the federal government, the U.S. government, did issue shirts. They were made out of something called garment flannel, which is a real heavy, itchy flannel, which I remember wearing either here or West Windsor South, the head. And the color bled onto some of my other stuff, at which point I said, I'm not wearing that anymore. And so I do what a lot of men did then. They would write home and say, please, to their mother, their sister, their wife, okay, their fiance, girlfriend, whatever, please send me the following: vest, socks, shirts, from home, homemade stuff, a lot of it, okay? And that's what this is. Okay, my wife, among a lot of other things, is an excellent seamstress. She did not weave the cloth, she did not make the buttons, but she did cut out the pattern according to an original pattern for shirts. She did put every stitch in this shirt by hand. And that's one of the things I always like to brag about, especially when we do West Windsor programs, and she's sitting right there and she gets all embarrassed. But it's worth it because she does excellent, excellent work. Not bad for a math teacher, no offense. So I'm wearing a shirt from home, which a lot of them on both sides did. As far as I know, the Southern government, I don't think ever issued any official government issued shirts. All right, so we got ourselves geared up so far like this. If we were in the Confederate Army, we might wear a jacket like this. It's going to be a little different from the Union jacket, which I'm going to be wearing most of the time, because it's cut shorter. It only comes to around the waist. All right. The South, remember, or you may have learned, maybe you haven't yet, didn't have the industry, the factories that the North did. And if they could save cloth by making their jackets a little shorter, they did. All right. The one thing they were big on, though, oh, I forgot to do that. They love buttons. And so this one has 3, 6, 9, and I don't have 2 of them buttoned for some reason. 9 brass buttons down the front. Other ones on these epaulets here. A lot of decoration. Looks very military. It actually looks a lot more military than the Union one I'm going to wear. And this was what they call a Richmond depot. Richmond, Virginia, one of the places the Confederate government set up to make uniforms. Type 1. A man named Les Jensen did a study back in the 1980s, I guess, of Confederate jackets and such, and was able to classify them into the main production out of Richmond, which was, by the way, the Confederate capital. All right. Three types. This was what he called the Type 1. And it's easy to tell what it was from pictures because, believe it or not, with the thousands that were made, there aren't any that anybody knows of in existence today. They're all gone. But we do have photographs. Photography was already a big thing by the Civil War. So we know they had these epaulets, they had, belt loops here, okay, and here, and so on. And piping, a material here for a little extra decoration. Tape, another kind of decoration, trims on the chevrons on the sleeves. Then they'll go from 1862 on for a couple of years with the Type 2, where it looks basically the same except they get rid of a lot of the fancy trimming. Then there's a Type 3 by the last year or two of the war, which is just the jacket, brass buttons, forget the trim, it's gone, the epaulets are gone. Things have to be more simple and more cheap to make. All right, that's what a Confederate might wear in 1862, let's say. Federal troops, Union troops, were, and notice they call that a jacket. They call this a sack coat, S-A-C-K, sack coat. This is what most Union troops wore for the entire war, this style. Okay? It comes down, the Confederate jacket would come to about here. Okay? This one comes down to here. They actually had longer ones, and there are a few units who actually wore the frock coat, which came down to about the knee. All right, both sides did. There was one unit fought at Antietam, fought at Gettysburg, called the Iron Brigade. These were men originally from Indiana and Wisconsin, later joined by another unit from Michigan, who were among the best fighters in the Union Army. There's a story that at Gettysburg, on the first day, when it was a meeting engagement, neither side was actually planning to fight a big battle starting on July 1st in 1863, but the two armies kind of collided, and a 3-day battle ensued, and the Union won, and so on and so forth. The Confederates were doing real great at one point on day one. They thought they had these Union troops all on the run. And then they saw some men advancing out of the woods across into some open ground. And they took one look, and these men from Tennessee and Alabama, places like that, okay, said, darn, except they didn't say darn. It's them black hat fellows again. Because the Iron Brigade, besides their frock coats, were noted by, and this really doesn't do justice because the black hats they wore had a higher crown than this, and they were pinned up on one side with an eagle pin, and if they had all the decorations they were supposed to by Gettysburg, they probably didn't, had an ostrich plume and all this fancy stuff, and they were easily recognized by their black hats and their frock coats. And the Confederates knew these were no green troops that didn't have much experience. These were the best that General Meade of the Union Army had to offer. And the Confederates knew they were going to be in for a fight. And they were. Okay, now we have to top it off. The black hats, the Iron Brigade chose to wear the very fancy called Hardee hat. A general named William Hardee before the war designed it. When the war came, he went off, fought for the Confederacy. But some of the Federal units, like the Iron Brigade, kept his hat. That became their trademark. When the Michigan regiment came to join them, 6 months or so before Gettysburg, they wouldn't let them wear those black hats until they had proven themselves on the battlefield, which they did in their first battle. And then the rest of the guys from Wisconsin, Indiana said, okay, you guys can wear the black hat. You guys are okay. This is called a forage hat. Spell the word F-O-R-A-G-E, forage. Anybody have any idea what it means to forage? It's a verb. Yeah.
Like to look through or to go for.
To look for something. What do you think you Civil War soldiers spent most of their non-battle time looking for? Food. Okay. Generally, when they're talking about foraging, they're talking about looking for food. All right. It has nothing to do with this cap. Okay. But somehow it got known as a forage cap. And this was the most, well, I know popular is the right word, but the most commonly worn type of cap. There are a couple of different types. The brim is different on some. The crown is a little higher. But you could easily tell it's the same basic design. Okay, and this is what most Federal soldiers wore during the Civil War. Well, okay, so we all look alike now. That's handy, but we're still not ready for the battlefield. Okay, so how do we get ready for the battlefield? We need this. This is called a cartridge box. What's a cartridge? Yeah.
It's like a little packet that I guess has ammunition in it.
Yeah, it's your ammunition. How many times could you fire the typical Civil War weapon without reloading?
7.
Some were. By the end of the war, some Union troops especially had repeaters, but basically most men on both sides didn't. Okay.
1.
Once, okay? Once. You fired and you had to reload, and you fired and you had to reload. This is the way armies had been fighting since muskets and so on had been introduced at the end of the Middle Ages, just about. These repeating weapons that were slow to be introduced, but did come around by the end of the war, could fire many shots much more rapidly, but they didn't catch on right away. Some of the higher-up generals thought, well, if a man can fire that fast, they'll just waste ammunition and these will be too expensive, so let's keep giving them the one-shot deal. Okay, so in this cartridge box, you would have 40 rounds or 40 cartridges, and a typical cartridge looked like this. okay, sort of like you described. This end, and if you're nervous about stuff, there is no gunpowder in here, okay? There's just some filler to make it look like an actual cartridge. It's waterproof paper. The bullet is on this end, and the bullet for an Enfield rifle musket looked like, because they didn't have plastic bags, so don't look. Like this. It was called a mini ball, invented by a French officer, captain in the French army. How many French students do you have here? Ah, formidable. Good. I took French in high school and at Rutgers when I was in college. I still love French. I try to speak it occasionally. Learned a lot of it. I grew up in upstate New York. I learned a lot of French, at least all the terms in hockey, by listening to the Montreal Canadiens on the radio. Radio Canada back in the 60s when I was growing up. Okay, I learned how to shoot, skate, score, all that good stuff. That never came up in class, though. Anyway, Captain Claude Minier invented, well, let's back up a little bit. What did bullets look like before Minier invented this type of, yeah?
They're just like round.
Yeah, they're round, like, oh, look like marbles of different sizes, like this. Okay? When you had a musket, that worked fine. As a matter of fact, Washington's army in the Revolutionary War, as well as some of the early people, because so many people were joining these armies in the North and South, they didn't have enough of the more modern rifle weapons that had greater range and accuracy. They had used some of the old-fashioned muskets. They loaded and fired the same way, they just were highly inaccurate. They would have one of those round balls, and you can't see these too well. 3 buckshot pellets. It was called a buck and ball cartridge. If you had a weapon that wasn't very accurate and its range was pretty short, at least you had 4 chances to hurt your enemy with 1 shot. Minier decided, you know what, we need a bullet that will fit in a rifle barrel for the better range, the better accuracy, but something that's easier to load than a round ball like this. Because what's the difference between a rifle and a musket? Anybody know? Yeah.
I think that a rifle has a longer range.
Well, yeah, but there's something that gives it that longer range and greater accuracy.
The shape of the bullet?
No, that plays into it, but that's not make the difference. Yeah,
The spin.
okay, here.
Spin.
It spins. Yeah, when this round ball comes out of a musket, it's like when if you took a basketball and just heaved it as far, you're not going to go that far, okay, even if you're pretty strong. If you take a football, throw a nice tight spiral, I've seen college quarterbacks as far as in pro court, they can throw a ball, oh my gosh, 50 or 70 yards down the field. I mean, I can't match anything like that, but it's physics. That spiral cuts down on the wind resistance, and there's all kinds of scientific explanations. But Minier figured out if you made a bullet this shape, but it needed to fit these grooves, there are spiral grooves cut to the inside of the barrel of a rifle that give it that spin when it's fired. But the bullet has to fit tight in that. With the round ball, that you gotta really ram that thing down every time you reload it. With this, you load it the same way, but it was easier, it was a little quicker. You'll notice, if you can, it's hollow inside. Okay? When the gunpowder explodes, it produces a certain amount of gas that forces this soft lead to expand, catches those grooves, gives it that spin, and increases the accuracy and range of your rifle. Okay? Claude Minier invented these. They came to America, and like I used to tell my classes, we love to Americanize names and foreign words. Claude Minier, and Vive la France, you know. He became here, Claude Mini, M-I-N-I-E, get the accent over the E. It became known as the mini ball, but it worked, and it was deadly. And one day, 23,000. Okay, so we have our little laugh at Claude Minier becoming the inventor of the mini ball, but there wasn't a whole lot of 20,000. All right, so you got 40 of these in here. If you go out to battle, you better have a smart officer if he knows that you're going to be running into, excuse me, an all-day struggle. He might make sure that his gunnery sergeant, okay, make sure that you have some extra ammunition. So you shove it in your pockets or wherever in case 40 bullets isn't enough to fight you, because you don't want to run out of ammunition in the middle of being attacked. Or well, we'll talk about what you have to fall back on if that's the case. All right, so that's the cartridge box. The next thing you need to be a successful soldier is this, which of course, whenever I go to hook it up, I always have a problem. Here's where the problem comes in. Number one, I can't see as well as I used to. There we go. Okay, that wasn't too bad. All right, besides the nice U.S. brass belt plate here, the U.S. box plate here, the U.S. Eagle on your press plate here, you have two important pieces of equipment on this belt, but one of them is way more important than the other one. What's this? Yeah.
Bayonet.
It's a bayonet. We'll get back to that in a bit. What's this? It's like a mini, almost like a miniature one of these. Yeah.
Powder.
No, you've all got your powder in your cartridge already. Yeah.
To keep a compass?
I'm sorry?
To keep a compass?
No. One more stab. Go ahead.
Is it like a little cloth to help clean out the barrel or anything?
No, that's something separate. Yeah, what?
Wasn't it like this sort of shotgun ammunition like you were telling us about?
No. It's called a cap pouch. In it, you have 60 tiny little things that look like they're made out of copper, look like little top hats. Okay, like men used to wear, okay? They're small enough to fit on a certain cone, which I'll demonstrate a little bit later, not the cap, because they do go bang and make noise and stuff, so don't have any of them here, okay? You need 60 of them to fire the weapon. Once you've loaded the bullet and the powder, in the old days, Washington's army had flintlock firing mechanism. You had to pour a little gunpowder in this metal thing that was near the trigger, close a thing, okay, pull the trigger, a piece of flint hit the steel, made a spark, ignited that little bit of priming gunpowder, and that was supposed to set off the gun. But those kind of things misfired an awful lot. Probably at least one in every 4 tries was a misfire. If it was damp, it didn't work in the rain, forget it. You had all this trouble. So somebody in the by the 1840s or so, invented these percussion caps. The guns loaded the same way till you got to the actual firing mechanism down by the trigger. All right, where muskets, you had to have this gunpowder, and you poured it in, you hoped that the thing hit the spark and all that stuff. Worked fine most of the time, but wasn't as all fire dependable as you might want it to be. All right, these things are super important. The little thing that looks like a top hat is a chemical called fulminated mercury. When you pull the trigger on a percussion lock gun, it doesn't hit steel and make a spark. It hits that cap. The fulminated mercury explodes. It sends a flash through a tube into where your gunpowder by the bullet is, ignites it, and these things will fire, and they don't misfire all that often. Once in a while they do, but not all that often. So these weapons have greater range, they have greater accuracy, and they're more dependable. See, I'm getting at here technology. Although I'm sure when I unveil one of the next pieces of equipment, won't look much like modern technology, but it was for the time. It was a technology, the greater accuracy and range, cannons that could fire hit targets over a mile away, that made the Civil War as bloody as it was. And it's frightening. These men who went off thinking, hey, we're going to go off, we'll fight one big battle, those Southerners or those Northerners or whoever, we'll give up, and that'll be the end of it. Haha, we'll be home before Christmas. And they did, if they made it, but they made it 4 Christmases later. Okay. This is called a haversack. Another part of the equipment. This is sort of a non-violent part of the equipment. All right. What do you think you carried in your haversack? And don't say what some wise kid said in one of my earliest classes they taught here, havers. There are no such things, I know. I don't know where the term came from, but yeah, the food. That's where you carried your food when you're marching and fighting. You might have some other personal effects, you know, a pencil, a diary, something to write with, letters home, maybe some candles. Maybe a prayer book. Because remember, I don't have one with me today, but you could have a knapsack with extra clothing and so on. There are other things that I could have brought in, but they weren't, I didn't think essential for what I wanted to talk to you about. All right. So, that brings me to the dietary part of my little speech here today. When you are in winter camp, and they don't fight much in the winter. What would that be? Wars don't take off for winter now so much. Although you do hear in Afghanistan, there's less activity in the winter. Winters there are pretty brutal, I guess. Why don't they fight in the wintertime? They're down south. I mean, they get some snow down there, but it's not as bad as if they were fighting in Maine or Minnesota. What are the roads made out of? Most of them. Dirt. You will get some snow in the winter down south. You do get a lot of cold rain. What happens to a dirt road when it rains a lot and gets all wet? Yeah.
Turns into mud.
Turns into mud. Okay? You didn't fight much in the winter because, among other things, you couldn't move 40, 50, 60, 70,000 men, plus all the wagons for food and ambulances and other supplies, all the guns, the cannons, and the caissons that help pull the cannons, all pulled by horses or mules, plus all the men marching. There's a town in northern Virginia called Fredericksburg. There was a battle fought there in December of 1862. Lee won. South was on the winning streak at that point. About a few weeks later, the federal general, General Burnside, for which we get the name Sideburns, but why they reversed it, I've never been able to figure out. But anyway, General Burnside figured, let's surprise those Southerners on the other side of this river. We'll march upstream, get around behind them, and win the war. So he started out, but it was winter. It was January in northern Virginia. It snowed occasionally. It rained a lot. The roads he was on turned into mud. There were stories, and more than one soldier wrote about it. The mules pulling some of the wagons, some of them sunk so deep in the mud, only their ears were visible. The poor things drowned in the mud and water. It's called the Mud March. One thing historians aren't always particularly imaginative. I had a professor at Rutgers tell me one time, you need a good imagination to study history, but historians aren't necessarily all that imaginative when they come to name things. So when Burnside's army bogged down in the mud and the mules sunk in the mud, it was called the Mud March. Needless to say, his plan failed miserably. He was quickly replaced by another general. All right. When you're in winter camp, get back to food, which was where I started this. All right. The government supplies you with food. You might get, fairly fresh beef or pork. They even found a way to dry out vegetables called desiccated vegetables. We have that today. You can go buy a Lipton soup or something. They have mixes that contain dried vegetables. Dump them in hot water. They absorb the water and become edible vegetables again. Soldiers didn't particularly care for them. Instead of calling them desiccated vegetables, they called them desecrated vegetables. To desecrate something is to misuse it, okay, abuse it. They weren't too fond of them, but they supplied you with food. Then you could always forage for food. These federal soldiers are down south. Who do they blame for starting the war? Southerners. That farmer down the road's got sheep, he's got hogs, he's got chickens, you name it. They started it. We're going to get what we need from him. And so they started raiding. They went foraging. They started raiding southern farms. Now, one of the early Union generals, I'm sure you'll talk about him at some point, is General George Mcclellan. He forbid that at one point early in 1862. He said, can't do that. We don't want to upset these Southerners. We're going to have to welcome them back into the Union someday. And if you treat them badly, they'll make it all the more difficult to be able to reunite the country. Which maybe makes sense to some people, but not to hungry soldiers. So the story goes, one day, the Union officer spots some of his men coming back to camp carrying a dead sheep. One of them carrying a dead sheep over his shoulder. Says, man, you know this is against the rules. You know that General McClellan said you can't do this. Who's responsible? They said, sir, wait a minute. You don't know what happened. You don't understand. We were walking down the road, and this sheep all of a sudden attacked us. We had to kill it in self-defense. The officer looked at him, and the whole thing settled. The men gave the officer a share of the sheep. He went, ate that, they ate their share, and everybody lived happily ever after, except the sheep. Okay, so foraging in the winter, government supplied food, but when you're fighting in the spring, summer, and early fall, you exist mainly on three basic food groups. Coffee, hardtack, and either bacon or salt pork. Stop and think about this. This is when you're marching and fighting, when your life is at stake, when you're the most stress on your body that you can possibly put on in a war other than the actual battle itself. And you're living basically on coffee, hardtack, which is a very hard cracker. It's about this thick, about this square, hard as anything, which is why they call it hardtack, and either bacon or salt pork. Now, I know most of you, or not all of you probably, are familiar to one degree or another with bacon. Okay? I love bacon, it's tasty. Much nutritious value. What is it mostly? Fat. There's meat there, but there's a lot of fat. All right? Anybody familiar with salt pork? Sometimes called sow belly. It's all fat. Southerners got issued a lot of that. Okay? So, coffee. Where's the food value? My wife's a coffee drinker, I'm not. She always tells me, it's better for you than the stuff you drink, which is an occasional soda, milk, water, juice, that kind of stuff. I said, there's no food value to coffee. The guys did back then, they didn't know about it. They knew it did one thing. If you're marching 25 miles a day and you get a break every hour or so, and you're tired, you start a fire. You get going, you boil some coffee. When the command comes to fall in and start marching in, you feel pretty good. You feel refreshed. Why? Caffeine. Did they know about that? No, they didn't have to. All they knew was that if they drank a nice big steaming mug of coffee, it would refresh them and pick them up when they started marching again. Hardtack had very little food value. The time when you're putting the most stress on yourself, you're eating the worst diet you possibly could have. Easy question. More men, a question. Okay, make it a question. Which killed more men in the Civil War, disease or battles? Disease. Oh yeah, definitely, way more. Surprise, when you're going through all of that and you're eating that stuff, disease is going to ruin it. But that and the fact that they just didn't have the medical knowledge that we do today. Of course, this is simple. It's a canteen for water. One of the things you really need when you're going through all this is water. If you get desperate enough, and they did from time to time, you would drink water from mud puddles, from ponds or streams where dead and wounded men had, wounded men crawled, some of them died there. There's a place in Tennessee where the Battle of Shiloh was fought. There's a spot there called Bloody Pond. So many wounded men went there to drink. They bled into the pond. It looked red. People drank out of it anyway because they needed water. You just absolutely did. It's a Confederate canteen. It's plain metal. The Union canteen is insulated with jean cloth or wool. Highly prized. If the Confederates get their hands on one of these, they did, because it kept your water cooler longer. This is a Confederate haversack to carry their food and whatever. The inside of this federal haversack is just like that, but what they did when they made them for the U.S. government is paint it with this black material that made it waterproof. That's not. These two things Confederates loved to get rid of, and get these if they could. All right, before we totally run out of time, which is what always happens to me, ta-da! This is the technology I was talking about. This is a Reproduction model 1853 Enfield rifle musket, made in England and imported by the thousands by both sides. Okay? Southerners, it was probably their most commonly used and favored weapon. The most favored weapon probably of the Union, certainly the more commonly issued, was the 1861 Springfield rifle musket. All right, but they all looked similar and they all worked the same. All right, when you went to load this thing, you reached into your haversack, pulled out a cartridge, bit off the one end. Why did I ask her to show me her teeth?
So, it seems like they're good enough to like.
Yeah, if you don't have teeth that oppose one another, so you can tear the end off that cartridge and pour the gunpowder in it, you can't use this weapon. They'll send you home. Okay? Set the bullet in there, the Minier bullet, draw the ram out. Ram it down, replace it. Then you're getting shot at. You going to take time to replace this thing? You can't load this thing. Then it becomes a very expensive club. Swing it, hit people with it. Okay. Now, here's the difference. That's the way Washington's men loaded their muskets years and years before. Here's the difference. This is called the half-cock position. It's like the safety. Here's that cone I talked about. You reach into your cap pouch. You put that little, imagine how small it is, because this cone isn't very big. You put that on there. Got the fulminator mercury in it. You go to the full cock, you pull the trigger, you fire, the hammer hits, it's like a giant cap gun. Hits that cap, a flash goes off down into the main, these things, well, those earlier muskets, maybe you hit something 50 to 75 yards. If you hit something 100 yards, you were very lucky, or the thing you hit was very unlucky. These are deadly at 300 to 400 yards. What's going to happen to the casualty rates when you've got weapons that have range and accuracy like this? They're going to skyrocket. And that's what we've already talked about Antietam. Okay. First Texas Infantry went into Farmer Miller's cornfield in Antietam, fought for maybe half an hour, lost 82% of the men that they took into that fight. 82%. First Minnesota Infantry, the Union Army, at Gettysburg, went into the second day fight, lost 80% of their men because of these weapons. Here's the bayonet, looks rather fearsome. Bayonet, swords, knives contributed less than 1% of all the battle wounds in the Civil War. Okay? It looked kind of ferocious though. Charge, bayonet. Ha! They're pretty scary when you get, 5,000 guys here going, Well, let me tell you, we're almost out of time. One of the biggest uses for these, stick it in the ground, stick a candle in it, and at nighttime, you write a letter home, or read a letter from home. They looked ferocious. There was hand-to-hand fighting, not as much as the movies might try to tell you, because once in a while, like at Gettysburg, at Pickett's charge on the final day, they got close enough for some brief but very nasty hand-to-hand fighting with bayonets and clubs and fists and whatever, rocks, whatever they... But it didn't happen that often. Why? Because with these weapons and the new technology, they're breaking up attacks a couple hundred yards out. Okay? And then you may count, put on your bayonet, yell your head off, and if your enemy is already breaking up, you go after him in a counterattack, you may sweep him off the field when you're out. How much time, Mr. Foley? 10 minutes. 10 minutes, good. This is amazing. There's something I've done before, but I don't know if we're going to have time for that, because that probably consumes more than 10 minutes. So why don't I, unless I can think of something else, throw it open for questions. Anybody have any questions on anything to do with the Civil War? What we've talked about here, maybe something that you've heard someplace else that we didn't talk about. Never fear, you're not going to go to lunch early, because I'll fill 10 minutes. Nothing. Yeah, go ahead.
How much did one of those rifles cost during the time?
During that time, probably less than $10. Now, these were imported from Britain, so they were more because you had to ship them over. But the Springfields that were made here at the Armory in Springfield, Massachusetts, and then private contractors made some of them. I think they sold for under $10. Originals, and this is a reproduction. Originals now, depending on condition, can go anywhere from 1,000 to 3,000, 4,000, depending. My son is a collector, but he doesn't collect that. I have one original musket. I was very lucky. We went to the 125th anniversary of the Battle of Gettysburg in 1988. Ran into a fabulous young guy who makes Civil War hats, mainly. He was doing the event, and he had with him an actual Model 1842 69 caliber United States musket. Okay, one of the things that didn't shoot so straight or so far, but it was a real one. And he took part, and he loaded and fired this thing. But he was also trying to sell it. My wife thought, this is a chance for my husband to get his first, genuine. It was made, the lock plate here, which has the date, it was made 1845. Might have been used in the Mexican War. Or, well, I think the books now call it the Mexican-American War. All right? So I said, no, we can't afford that kind of stuff. We had a 9-year-old kid, and et cetera, mortgage to pay, you know the story. So anyway, behind my back, when she got home, she contacts this guy down in Virginia and buys this original, still fireable. I got it in 1988. I immediately retired it. It hasn't been fired since. It will not be fired again, at least not in my lifetime. But it's one of the few. This bayonet is an original Enfield bayonet, and it's not the only original piece I have here today. She paid for that musket, made in 1845 in Springfield, Massachusetts, the Armory, and a bayonet, original bayonet, goes with it, and a sling, one of those things, straps you can put a $400 for the deal. 400. That's 12. It's almost 30 years ago. $400. That same thing today, my son says, goes into a shop in Gettysburg, could probably get well over $1,000 for it easily. Okay, throw in the bayonet and the whole works. So, anyway, any other questions? Yeah.
Okay, so in battle, like, wouldn't it be like hard and annoying for them to like carry all that stuff while they were fighting?
Yeah, which is why a lot of times, especially earlier in the war, if they had stuff in a blanket roll or a knapsack, the officers would tell them to drop packs. They'd assign a few soldiers to watch them while everybody went off to fight. But this kind of stuff, you needed. Okay, this is essential. This is essential. Water is essential. Maybe you could do without your haversack temporarily, but I don't think they often drop that. But knapsacks and stuff they did. Then they found sometimes the guards weren't all that great at their job, and people would steal some of the stuff. And so they got to a point where they didn't do that as often, which meant they might have gone into battle lugging more stuff. There's a place in Gettysburg that one of the local societies went, and you go in, it's an interactive kind of museum, and one of the things is, guess how many pounds your typical load of equipment you'd be carrying. And it's always over 40 pounds, between 40 and 50 pounds, counting the rifle or musket, which were 9 or 10 pounds each. And remember, I don't have lead bullets and gunpowder in here. I don't have water in here. I do have some stuff in here. So they, you know, and that's why your shoes have to be pretty sturdy. Okay, fine.
You're talking about like the shoes. Would the shoes, like, you were talking like the mud march a while ago. Would like the shoes get like seeped in with mud, or were they like sturdy enough to go?
Sometimes they get sucked right off your feet. There's a battle in the town of Newmarket, Virginia, in May of 1864. In fact, the anniversary is coming up, I think, in about a little more than a week. In the Shenandoah Valley, one of the prettiest parts of Virginia. My sister lives down there now. Okay, Battle of Newmarket. The Confederates were kind of short of men. They sent messengers to the Virginia Military Institute in Lexington, Virginia, which is still a school. There are two nationally known colleges in Lexington, Virginia. One is Washington and Lee University, where Robert E. Lee became college president after the war. He became college president of Washington College, named after George, and did such a great job, and everybody in Virginia still respects Robert E. Lee. They changed the name of the school to Washington Lee. The other one is the Virginia Military Institute, where the Confederate General Stonewall Jackson had been a professor before the war. Okay, they sent those cadets. Some of them were as young as like 15. What are most of you guys? About 14 on average? Yeah, okay. Not much older than you. And a lot of soldiers got in even when they were supposed to be 18. They lied about their age and got in anyway. But those cadets went and fought at the Battle of Newmarket. To get back to your shoes, there is a portion of that battlefield called the Field of Lost Shoes. There had been heavy rain the day before the battlefield. I think during part of the battle that was going on. And these young cadets, not many of them were beyond 19 or 20, most of them were younger than that, charged across this field, and the mud literally, as they pulled off their shoes, and a lot of them ended up with their shoes back there. A movie was made by some Civil War movie makers a couple years ago called Field of Lost Shoes. Kind of interesting, it's all about that. Yeah?
Okay, this is kind of a side question. When they ran, did they go back for their shoes, or did they just leave it and keep on running?
Well, let's put it this way. If you're charging across the field and there's cannons firing at you and hundreds of Yankee soldiers firing, I don't think you're going to go back looking for your shoes until the fight's over. Which, by the way, the Confederates did win the Battle of Newmarket. It wasn't a huge battle, but a lot of studies have been done because of the young cadets from the Virginia Military Institute who fought there. Yeah.
This has to do with the knapsack thing. So if they went out to battle and then someone with a knapsack died, would the knapsack be like sent back home, or would people from the army use it?
Well, the knapsack itself might be reused, but you know, the people who are in charge of looking after the dead and so on probably would go through and try that anything personal would be sent home. Sometimes it didn't happen that way, but I'm sure, you know, most times it did. That's what they tried to do at least. Yeah.
Wait, so did cannon technology improve for this war like a lot also? Like from the Revolutionary War on, like you said, like
The cannons?
Yeah.
Yeah. They now had rifled cannons with the same effect. They could shoot further and more accurately. You still had to see your target. It wasn't that you used higher levels of math and all kinds of things that I can't tell you, because I'm convinced my wife and those math teachers make up these languages the rest of us can't know. It's like a secret code. Okay, but anyway, today you use math and radar and all this kind of stuff. You can hit targets, you know, hundreds of miles away.
But like,
Then you still have to see your target. But yeah, the cannons could fire more accurately and at greater range than they could during Washington's time or Napoleon's time or whatever. Yeah.
How did you get all this Civil War stuff?
Well, first of all, you have to be old and have spent many years doing what I've done. I started seriously collecting stuff in the seriously in the late 80s. Really, my first rifle that I bought was my first uniform, which was featured in the time I had the yearbook dedicated to me, which was back in 1986. If I were in the real Civil War, which some of my kids I taught were convinced I was 150 years old and had actually been in the Civil War. I started in 1988. By the 90s, our son started reenacting seriously in 1995 when he turned 16. He's the one, I had always kind of led him to all the historical places. My wife would say, enjoy it now, because he's probably going to want to be something entirely different from a history teacher when I already told you, what does he do?
He's a
He's a history teacher, a U.S. history teacher in Virginia, right? Okay, so that's one. I was right somehow. She was wrong somehow. Can you repeat? How did I say? Yeah, collecting. So little by little, I used to get stuff, and when he was coming along, I would take, if I got a better quality jacket, I'd give him the old one that wasn't quite as good. When he started reenacting, he went really gung-ho. When his stuff, his really, really good stuff, like this, started to get old, he wanted to replace it, he would pass it down to me. So kind of the situation was reversed. But it's just over a long, long period of time. Okay. Mr. Foley, how many?
Maybe 1 minute.
One more? Oh, 1 minute. Okay. Somebody I haven't called on yet. Okay.
Was there like a high percentage of like former slaves in the Union Army?
High percentage, no. Definite numbers that counted, yes. Okay. There was even an attempt, I don't know if any of you have ever seen the movie Glory. It's on TV or once in a while. It came out in the late 80s. It's an excellent movie. It's got Morgan Freeman and Denzel Washington and Matthew Broderick. How bad can it be? Okay. If you ever get a chance to see, it's about the 54th Massachusetts, which was the first, or one of the first, what they called colored regiments back then. It was the flight time back there. And it's pretty well done, pretty accurate historically too. Okay, yeah, real quick.
We learned about like some Civil War songs and music. Do you have a favorite?
Favorite Civil War song? I'm a Northern. I was born in New Jersey, raised in New York State. I've lived in New Jersey almost all my adult life. But for one reason or another, one of my favorite tunes from that time, it didn't start out as a Civil War song, it started out as a minstrel song. It was Dixie. Okay, I know some of the words are kind of, but there's a lot of marching music that I like. Fifes and drums. We were at a Civil War reenactment in Pennsylvania last Saturday. And my wife and I are shopping, buying things for this kind of stuff. And I heard fifes and drums coming, and I just freaked out. And wherever the fifes and drums are, that's where you're going to find me. So a lot of the marching music I like. Yeah, go ahead.
So they just had like certain people in the war that just like played music?
Musicians? Yeah. Drummer boys, and a lot of them were boys. Okay? They had fifes and drums and buglers. And getting back to what we were talking about, for the need for uniforms so you could identify your friends and your enemies, with all that noise, all that smoke, you couldn't necessarily hear an officer give a command to attack or retreat or do this and that. So they had signals, the drums, the fifes, or the cavalry, especially the bugles, certain signals meant advance, retreat, whatever. And the men could hear that better than they could hear an officer trying to scream over all that noise and confusion. So they were. When the battles got really hot, or toward the end, when it was time to take care of the wounded and stuff, the musicians, some of them were men, a lot of them were boys, would put down their stuff and they would go out with the stretchers and help bring in the wounded and stuff like that. So there were plenty of them, and they were very, very important.
Well,
Okay, I gotta say one thing before we wrap it up. This is the biggest class I've ever performed, for whatever you want to call it. And you have been the absolute best. My thanks to you all.
well, thank you, Mr. Hallock, and we appreciate it very much. So one more hand. Give me one more hand.
Will always be a special place. It doesn't resemble the physical plant that I remember from all those years, but I'm sure the spirit and the feeling is just the same as it's always been. Thank you.